In this video, I'll be attempting to survive 100 days in Thailand in hardcore Minecraft. This means I'll have to watch out for the heat, the aggressive mobs, and even mythical creatures, all while I explore the wonders that Thailand has to offer and build myself a base for survival. With that being said, let's get started. I spawned in and took a look around me, only to see that I was in a tropical forest of some kind. There were also some rivers in front of me, so I decided to cross this one and get some wood. I then made a crafting table and took another look around, and that's when I spotted this very large lizard. You're friendly, right? You don't look friendly. I know you're not a Komodo dragon, because those are only in Indonesia. You look like one of its brothers. Okay, and I don't want anything to do with that. Shortly after, I also spotted this croc. Okay, yeah, we're just not gonna go in that direction. So I figured that it was time for me to get some stone. I started to dig out my mine, but as I did so, I noticed that I was overheating. Therefore, my new objective was to get iron, so I could make shears and craft some leaf armor, which would cool me down. Also wanted wool, so I could craft a bed. Either way, after getting my stone, I continued along this river path, only to see that it led to a dead end. So I made the smart decision to go down the crocodile path. That was wrong, that was wrong, that was the wrong move. Only to see another dead end. Naturally, this is what I decided to take to the trees. But as I climbed these trees, I was once again overheating. Yeah, I really wanted my leaf armor. But I kept tree jumping as I scouted the area, noticing that I was also getting low on food. As the sun set on my first day, I got to a good mining spot, and got to work. I ended up finding redstone and copper, but even after I crafted a new pickaxe, no iron. Next morning I left my mine and resurfaced, only to have another fun encounter. No thank you. Oh, and I spotted this tiger, but as I had clearly found the coast, I killed these lobsters and cooked some lobster meat. And by the time it was done cooking, the tiger had vanished. I took a look at these other lobsters and found this half red, half blue one. I also learned that lobsters seem to rarely actually drop the meat. But I at least had some food. Now, back to the quest for finding iron. I decided to take a look for shipwrecks nearby. But with no luck, I just followed along the coast, hoping that I could find a structure with iron or wool that way. After stopping to get some more lobster though, I ended up spotting something completely unexpected. And the wildlife outside this temple was even more unexpected. Yet, as I approached it, I figured out what it was. Are you kidding me? It's a pillager tower. They've really upgraded since the last one. Given that I had no other option, I attempted to sneak into the tower to try and at least find some wool for a bed. But I quickly got attacked and had my health reduced significantly. Okay. Nope. No more. So that meant that I would have yet another mining night. But as I mined that night, I could hear the pillagers waiting right above me. That didn't matter though, as at the end of the night, I finally found some iron. On day 3, I collected my cooked iron and crafted some shears. I then started to dig an escape tunnel out. But as I did, I heard a rather alarming sound coming from above. Yeah, it was storming, which meant that dangerous mobs could spawn wherever they wanted now. And this led to a very narrow escape. Go. Go, 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 go. Okay. That was awful. That might have been one of the worst starts of any of these I've ever had. Upon escaping, I sat here in the water, trying to figure out just what I was gonna do. And as I crafted some glass bottles to drink water out of, I came up with a plan. I started towering up and eventually across. After a lot of block placing, I arrived at my destination. I immediately snuck in and destroyed this spawner, before looking at the loot. And the loot was great, but there was one problem. It gave me one less string than what I needed to craft a bed. So I knew I had to continue down. I secured the next floor, but when I went to look for loot, I found that there was no string. When I went to try the first floor though, I quickly realized that I needed to run. Regardless, I spotted a spider, and after crafting a shield, I approached it and killed it, receiving the very string that I needed to craft a bed and go to sleep in. Get me. Yeah, there we go. That was the most stressful opening to any one of these programs I've done. Risky opening aside, I decided to continue rowing along the shore, this time to explore and look for a place to build my base at. I ended up stopping to get some wood. After doing so, I kept rowing, until I spotted a giant structure. And no, this was not another pillager base. Although Thailand's history might be ancient, I'm starting off this video with a much more modern wonder. It might not look that way, but the Sanctuary of Truth is a passion project designed by Thai billionaire Lake Viriafan, who had the attraction built to embody Thai values and reflect the grand architecture of the Ayutthaya kingdom. But more on that later. As for the Sanctuary of Truth, it should be noted that the entire structure is made from wood, and it reaches up to almost 350 feet, or 105 meters. Yet, as I tried to enter the temple, I saw hordes of mobs within, and decided to just continue on my way. And that's when I spotted Crocodile Beach. Oh, and I witnessed this monitor die. Look at you, you're such a swimmer. You okay? What's going on here? Anyways, I finally crafted my leaf armor, and then continued along the coast. After a bit of rowing, I spotted these elephants. And as I approached them, this happened. Is it chasing me? I don't know. I can't tell. I can't tell. I can't tell. Next morning, I healed up and cooked some of this monitor meat that I had collected. I don't know what that is, but it's not coming near me. As I rode along the shore, I found some farmland. So I took some potatoes and then saw this unknown crop. I continued up this river and reminded myself of my goal, and that was to find a spot for my base and also explore. Yet as I went further inland among the dense tropical forestry, I decided that I actually wanted a coastal house. Otherwise, I knew I'd have trouble finding my base later on. So back to the coast I went. Only this time, I headed into deeper waters. I rode for the rest of the day. And just for some context, I actually wasn't entirely in the open ocean. Instead, I was right here in the Gulf of Thailand. So luckily for me, the water was shallow enough for me to build a platform from to then sleep on. That is a terrific sunset. On the morning of day 6, I ended up finding the other side of the Gulf. I then followed along the coast in an effort to search for the best possible location for my base. I also got some more lobster, and had one actually pinch me. Oh. Anyways, I found this clear and open area that seemed perfect for a base. And so, as it began to rain, I started doing some terraforming. And this took just about all day. My new goal was to do a rough outline of my base, before then exploring some more. But as I terraformed into the night, I woke up the next morning and decided that I didn't actually want my base to be on land. In other words, all of that work was for nothing. I love productivity. Anyways, I started building my outline over the water. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 18, 20. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Get out of my way. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I then got tons of wood. And finally, by sunset, I had built a general outline for my base. On the morning of day 8, I knew I wanted to do a few more things to this outline before I set off to explore again. And so, I got a lot more wood. I then built this platform, killed some creepers, broke my axe, and then finally settled on a design for my base that I was happy with. Take a look. Now, the next day, it was time to explore again. But after a good bit of rowing, I figured I should switch it up a bit and go into the forest. So I did just that. As I explored the humid tropics, I spotted some mountains in the distance. I also ended up taking a lot of fall damage. But for those of you familiar with the channel, is that really a surprise? Fall damage aside, I did a lot of travel on this day, and it was relatively boring, to be honest. However, what I spotted that night was anything but boring. I approached the ominous tower the next morning, and as I did so, I spotted this huge snake. Regardless, I climbed up the side of the tower, knowing that it was most likely a hostile tower. As I peeked inside, my suspicions were confirmed. So that's not gonna work. Oh, no, you can't spawn there. Because I said so. You cannot spawn there. In response, I climbed to the top floor and quickly sealed it off. Then I got to look at all the cool loot, of which there was a lot. I stole some books as well, before noticing that this brewing stand was full of potions. Yeah, I got some pretty decent potions here. And then I used this cauldron to get some water. Either way, I was pretty happy with this loot, and I also knew that I definitely wasn't ready to handle the rest of the tower yet. So back to the coast I went. And once again, I got myself low from fall damage. You know what? At least I'm consistent. That's my positive spin on that. Next morning, I found myself having a peaceful trip along the coast. No crocodiles, no snakes, just scenery. See, the word Thai actually means free, so Thailand is the land of the free, almost like a neighboring motto to the United States. But a big difference between the two countries is Thailand was never actually colonized. In fact, it's the only country in Southeast Asia to have dodged the imperial powers of the past. History aside, I did a lot of rowing on day 11, and was considering heading back to my base in a day or so. However, that's when I came across this giant snake, which I promptly put in a box. And I saw another one, which was finally my cue to leave. That evening though, I found a river, and I decided to head up it. On day 12, I followed this winding river path for quite a while, until I noticed a change in the terrain. But when I turned this corner, I noticed a much more drastic change in the terrain. Khao Sok is not just one of Thailand's most famous natural attractions, but also one of the most unique geographic locations that I've covered. Not only is it surrounded by the oldest evergreen rainforest in the world, but the limestone cliffs and winding rivers make this national park absolutely unmatched. If it wasn't already on your travel list, consider the fact that you can stay on the Khao Sok Lake in various sets of bungalows. And shortly after entering this natural wonder, I found myself at my very own set of bungalows. Only they were occupied. Yet, as I took a look at these little houses, I saw some materials that I really wanted for my own base. So I borrowed some mangrove wood and lanterns, while realizing that, given I was in Khao Sok National Park, I was now making my way to southern Thailand, which was a bit further than I wanted to go right now. So, knowing that I'd be heading back to my base tomorrow, I decided to row around the national park that evening. After waking up in the bungalow the next morning, I stepped out to an amazing view. Before heading out and back to my base, I decided that today I would not be stopping, but rather going full speed home. I navigated through these rivers and checked to see if I could craft a sailboat of some kind, but I had no luck finding one. Regardless, I did a lot of rowing this day, so let's speed this up. And finally on day 14, after getting some more dark oak slabs, I made it back to my base. And with that being said, it was definitely time to do some base work. So I went to go and get some more wood, and stumbled across this guy. I finished the dark oak trim, and did the walls of my base. And the next day, I started on the fencing. My goal was to finish the first floor before heading out to explore some more. I also wanted to find a companion to put in the house. But as it started to rain, I finished the fencing and windows, all while I tried to figure out what material I was going to use for the roof. So next morning, I headed into the forest to try and find a different wood type. And that's when I spotted something completely unexpected. Okay. Yeah, this thing started to attack me, and it was fast. It kept running back, and naturally I wanted to follow it. But that soon proved to be a terrible idea. Okay. So I immediately got on my boat and rowed straight into the water. I could only hope that it wouldn't be there when I returned. The Naga is a famous mythical creature that is found in religions all across Southeast Asia. While its meaning differs depending on the religion, some cultures categorize this creature as being a violent enemy, while others treat them as respected gods. Now, it is important to note that its appearance also changes based on the region and culture, but the mythological Naga that many of us are familiar with today has the lower body of a serpent and the upper body of a human, and an intent to hunt and kill. Now, I should mention that this incredible mob was created by my friend Steve Locks. You can find it for free on his Planet Minecraft, so definitely be sure to check that out. Link is in the description. As I rowed further into the Gulf, I had no idea that my fun for the day wasn't quite over. Yeah, they've really upgraded this time. So, on day 17, I decided to try and loot what I could from the ship, including the dark oak wood that it was made out of, as that would make for a great roof. I boarded the ship and quickly sealed off the doorways. I then took a look at the loot on the top deck, and found lots of fish, some iron, papaya saplings, and this relic that adds more damage to my punches. And I also found this diamond. But given that there were no explosives, I wasn't sure how I was going to raid this ship. So for now, I decided to keep this ship here, as I now know that it's relatively near my base. With that being said, I decided to head back in that direction, hoping that the Naga was gone. And after a lot more rowing, I finally spotted my base. And sure enough, there was no Naga. So after collecting this power bow from a skeleton, I planted my papaya saplings and went to sleep. Next morning, I decided to try and finish the first floor roof, and noticed that the papaya tree had grown. Oh, look at that. Only as I continued my roof work, something alarming occurred. What? Okay, right. Okay. The Naga was back, but it had a bow. Either way, this just confirmed that it was hunting me. As I dodged the arrows and ran around the Naga, I quickly got to my bed, before immediately leaving the next morning. Yeah, my roof was complete enough for me to head out. And for those of you wondering why I don't try to fight it yet, well, the creatures I come across in these programs have very different levels of difficulty. Like, imagine if I had tried to fight the Wendigo in Alaska. But anyways, I decided that the next time I see the Naga, I would actually take a few shots at it. I headed up the coast and found myself doing nothing but rowing for just about the whole day. I stumbled across some farmland that afternoon as it started to rain, and that night, I spotted Bangkok from afar. Next morning, I decided to take this river adjacent to the city, and figured that I should aim to explore some of northern Thailand. So that was my new goal: explore northern Thailand and get some resources for my base. Although as I continued up this winding river, I found myself in crocodile country. So, being the self-proclaimed intellectual that I am, I carefully walked along the riverbanks, and then continued along my way. Yeah, I know, very intellectual. I rode my way up the river, and noticed that the scenery was really cool. As I journeyed on through the evening, I came to a stop, as I spotted another glimpse of an incredibly rare animal. Not much happened the next day, as I found myself doing a lot of river travel. Eventually, I parted ways with the water, and decided to head into the forest, as I spotted some mountains in the distance. And given that I was trying to reach northern Thailand, this seemed like a good sign. So I continued on towards the mountains. And the next day, I climbed up them. I also spotted this weird fly creature. Not sure what that is. But it didn't really matter anyways, as when I crossed the mountain, I realized that I was completely lost. I figured I should just keep going forward. And when I stumbled across this river, I made a smart move and decided to follow it. At this point, I was also thinking about what companion I should get, as most of the wildlife I'd come across was hostile. But that thought soon left my head, as the next morning, upon following the river further, I soon realized that I was definitely not in northern Thailand. No, I was at a rather famous waterfall in western Thailand instead. The Thi La Su is both the largest and tallest waterfall in Thailand, measuring in at 820 feet, or 250 meters tall. It's also home to some of Thailand's rarest wildlife, such as the Siamese crocodile, or the clouded leopard. In short, this natural wonder is well worth the jungle trek or river cruise to get here. Now, in order to get my bearings, I climbed the mountain along the waterfall, and when I got to the top, I didn't see anything helpful. So I decided to go back the way I came, and that's when I came across these little fish. This gave me an idea. I crafted a water bucket, and quickly scooped up the arowana. And when I went to get in my boat, I had another one waiting for me. Only this didn't end so well. You've been reduced to Nemo. Either way, I finally have a companion. Next morning, I decided that my new objective should be to get back to where I was, and started my journey home. Oh, and I named my arowana Terrence. I did have a teacher named Terrence once, but he was a cool dude, so. Anyways, I ventured on through the mountains and took tons of fall damage, before seeing a familiar river that afternoon. On day 25, as I rode back down the river, I figured that I should stop by the pillager ship on the way back to my base, so I could get some more dark oak wood. However, as I was distracted by my thoughts, I soon found myself in a completely different river system than the one I was in before. Too late, this is my way home now. That afternoon though, I spotted this monitor. And me being me, I decided to scoop him up. Next morning I named my monitor Perry, and then found yet another dead end. I was getting frustrated at this point, so I decided to tower up into the trees to see where the shore was from here. But imagine my surprise when I saw not the shore, but a massive structure. Knowing that it was either another pillager penthouse or another Thailand wonder, I approached it very carefully. Yet, as I got closer, I was relieved to see that it was in fact a wonder. And not just any wonder. This one is fascinating, because the city of Ayutthaya was the former capital of the Kingdom of Thailand, being founded in the year 1350. This incredible ancient city then thrived well into the 18th century, hosting a population that some estimates say could have reached up to 1 million residents, thus making it one of the largest cities in the world at that time. That's what makes its destruction even more devastating. See, in the mid-18th century, the Burmese-Siamese War was devastating both countries, Siam being the name of Thailand until the year 1939. Now, this war was started over land disputes, and what followed was the Burmese invasion and subsequent destruction of Ayutthaya. So what stands here today are the impressive remains of one of the former capitals of the world. Now, you might be wondering why I don't go and, take some of these resources. Well, I'm never going to really do that in a religious site or in a historic site in this series, because it just seems wrong, Seems wrong. I walked around the ruins of Ayutthaya and knew that this had to be one of my favorite wonders I've covered. And I have to give a huge thanks to my new build team who helped me make this map and did all of Ayutthaya. They are the GoFidako team, and I've linked their Fiverr below. But with that being said, it was time for me to return to Perry, and then to my base. Next morning I made it back to Perry and started on my trip home. Even though I had no clue as to where to go from here, I confidently rode down this river, hoping I would see the shore eventually. But yeah, there are a lot of rivers in Thailand. In fact, the next 2 days were used up only by river travel. Nothing interesting really happened other than some mild frustration and crocodile encounters. But eventually, on day 30, I saw the beach. And finally, on the morning of day 31, I spotted my base again. Luckily there was no Naga this time, but that didn't stop me from making a rather definitive border. Okay, I hereby proclaim this as the Great Wall of stay away from my base. I carried on through the day by placing some lanterns on my base, and that's when I realized that I'd have to make a little stop at the pillager ship tomorrow, so I could get some more dark oak wood. And so, that's just what I did. I set off for the pillager ship and made it there in a timely fashion, before dismantling some more of the ship. I also found this loot room that I hadn't noticed earlier, so I stole this potion of luck and some decorations for my base, and then as I continued my wood collecting, I found a loot room that was more my speed. However, I didn't get the chance to finish looting this room, as the pillagers quickly showed up and overwhelmed me. So I left to head back to my base, and arrived at sunset. Before heading to sleep, I planted these papaya saplings, and considered making a garden. Oh, and I also started cooking these fish. And on day 33, I got to work on my base. I suppose this is where the mandatory base montage would go. So let's start the music, and let's get building. I started making a lot of glass, and did some terraforming on the outside of my base, before noticing something rather upsetting. Alright, stop the music. Perry? Tragedies aside, Terrence was still okay, and that meant I could continue building. I worked on the roof and started on Terrence's enclosure. And as I gathered wood in the forest, I heard a hiss that then made me decide to leave the forest. I then collected my papaya and made a little memorial for Perry. And the next day I worked on my new garden, finished my enclosure for Terrence, and did some interior design. This went right into day 35, where I finally placed Terrence in the enclosure. I then did some more interior work and also planted these lime saplings that I'd forgotten about, and some bamboo. I was pretty surprised that no Naga had shown up, but that just meant that I had my new objective. Tomorrow I was going to get some sun and head to southern Thailand in search of both structures and plants for my garden. And so, day 36 brings us to the end of my building montage, as I was ready to see what southern Thailand had to offer. So I headed south down the coast. Only I planned on stopping by a certain pillager tower on the way down, as I needed some more dark oak wood again. I had a vague idea of where it was, so I watched the tree line carefully as I continued down. You know, my girlfriend keeps getting Gatorade, and she never ends up drinking it, so I always have to drink it. I don't really like Gatorade. I'm not really a fan of it. So on a completely unrelated note, I am doing a Gatorade giveaway. I managed to spot the tower by that evening, before noticing a familiar face. I woke the next morning ready to raid the tower, only I made a mistake in trying to go to the floor above me. So I got to the first floor and quickly destroyed this spawner. After finding some decent loot, I headed back up to the very much occupied floor. I ended up having to use my water bucket to drink, and I also ate a lot of my papaya. These guys were getting me low. But eventually, I found a method. I then broke the spawner, only to realize that this floor had no loot at all. After that disappointment, it was time for me to get moving, so I healed up and went to the shore. Only I almost ran into this guy. But after hanging around him for a bit, it almost seemed like it was friendly. So I tried to get it in my boat, but I guess it was a little too big. Regardless, let's go ahead and talk about Southeast Asia's native python. The reticulated python is truly a modern-day beast, due to the fact that it can reach a length of over 30 feet, or 10 meters. This makes it the longest snake in the world, which it definitely uses to its advantage. These constrictors are often found near or in bodies of water, as just like me, they like to go swimming. As I left my snake friend behind, I continued south, into the next day, where I spotted the river that led to Khao. This is when I decided to actually try the river adjacent to it, to see where these waterways led. Right to a dead end. But I was spotting some mountains in the distance. So, after coming across yet another dead end, I left my boat and went by treetop. I would also have a higher chance of finding structures this way. Yet as I continued across the humid landscape on day 40, I spotted some water. And upon following it, I found myself on Thailand's west coast. The scenery was definitely different. And as I continued along it, I found this hill that was covered in monkeys. Yeah, I knew that I had a fun couple of days ahead of me. And to top it all off, I saw a pretty great sunset that night. On the morning of day 41, I decided to steal this monkey, before heading along the coast some more. But after only a few seconds of travel, I spotted something big in the distance. I could tell what it was pretty quickly. Thailand has 76 provinces, and one of the most famous provinces is right here, Phuket, the tropical paradise of Southeast Asia. And towering above the natural skyline of Phuket is this, the Big Buddha. This incredible statue sits at 148 feet tall, or 45 meters. This is yet another new wonder of Thailand, having started construction in the early 2000s, and serves as one of the many faces of this awe-inspiring country. I walked up the grand staircase in front of the statue and took a look at the view from the top. I then remembered that I had an objective, and that was to gather resources for my base and garden. So back down the mountain I went, as I joined my monkey and continued rowing. Only as soon as I turned this corner, I was met with a surprising sight. Not only were there crates of food, but there was also a crocodile performing a death roll on a wandering trader's llama. I tried to help, but it was too late. However, when the croc turned its attention to my monkey, I had to kill it. This little cove was not only scenic, but it had some pretty cool loot and wildlife. As the sun started to set, I could see why Phuket was one of Thailand's most visited places. Next morning, I decided to take a look at the loot. Not only were there papaya, lime, and pepper crates, but also a lot of Thai foods within this chest, as well as a backpack. I actually put fish sauce in my rice one day instead of soy sauce. Don't recommend doing that. Definitely don't recommend it. I collected these flowers and chairs as well, and on the way out of the cove, I got a really cool view of the Big Buddha. Then I continued along the shore, and explored these nearby islands, but didn't really end up finding anything. So on day 43, I got back to my boat, and continued rowing around these islands. And that's when I spotted a light source. Is that lava? And upon closer inspection, I saw that it wasn't lava, but rather an ominous cave with residents. Wanting to explore this cave, I figured going in from the top to take a look would be a smart idea, but I soon found this other entrance to it. Only this is where I got swarmed by zombies. I decided to dig down in a different part of the cave and heal up, before sneaking my way in. Only I soon wished that I hadn't. Yeah, this wasn't good. I mined along this wall. Only after peeking back into the cave, I got quite the scare. Ooh, okay, alright. That was my cue to leave. Okay, that's... Ooh, hi there, hello. Ooh, hi everybody, hello. My name is Markiplier. So yeah, I rode away. Only as the sun started to set, I noticed that I had collected a trumpet. The next morning, I was about ready to head back to my base, so I started in that direction, but then spotted a beach area. It had some pretty cool loot, like these palm logs and this fire attack relic. Only after rowing some more, I took a look at the nearby islands, and it was clear that I had found yet another wonder of southern Thailand. The Phi Phi Islands are a vacation hotspot for Thailand, as they take the word scenic to a whole new level. From their otherworldly rock formations to their unmatched beaches, these limestone cliffs hold caves and wildlife that only add to the paradise level of beauty within the area. Now this is one of those wonders that, due to the scale of the map, isn't even comparable to its real-life counterpart. So maybe you should go and see them for yourself. As I sailed around these islands, I spotted this village, and it had some decent loot, most of it being meat. What's going on here? Anyways, I took some lanterns and these cool chairs, before seeing that someone had stolen my boat. And now it was really time for me to head home, but this time I went to see if I could take a different path. Next day, I kept along the west coast. I also named my monkey Perry, an original name that I had just thought of. But as I progressed through these waterways, I figured that these mountains ahead were near the Khao area. So I went to scout it out. And it turns out that the mountains were Khao. So I led Perry up the back of them, and this just meant that I got to visit Khao again. And I also at least knew where I was going now. I made it to the rivers by nightfall. And the next morning, I decided to do a non-stop rowing day, just like day 13, so I could see if I could even make it back in one day. Only as I rowed and just kept rowing, I knew that I probably wouldn't even see my base by the end of the day. And I was correct. It wasn't until day 47 that I spotted my house on the water, and upon arriving, I immediately got to work on my garden. I also did some interior work, like the kitchen, and then did housework through the rest of the day. The next morning, I started on the next floor. I also theorized that there must be a Naga cave nearby, as maybe that was their source. Regardless, I did tons of roof work, knowing that I would have to make another trip soon to get some more dark oak wood. But hey, on the bright side, this base was actually starting to look pretty good. The next day, I decided to do this glass floor, and figured I should head to the pillager ship tomorrow to then get my wood. I did mostly interior work today, and when it started thunderstorming that afternoon, I went to sleep early. And that brings me to day 50. Normally I like to take this day to say thanks for watching this far into the video. Also, the comment that guessed the location first was Brian Konopka 5. So congratulations, Brian. I tried making this one harder, but you all are good. I'll definitely have to up my game in the next community post. Anyways, while I gather this wood, let me just tell you that if you like the music and ambiance of these videos, or even just the travel aspect of them, then you should really join my Discord. I'm adding a feature where you can tune into one of my audio channels and listen to music and ambiance from all of the places that I visit. It's also just a fun community with some pretty great staff, so if you're interested, an invite link will be in the description below. But with that being said, let's get back to the video. Day 51 was my last housework day for a bit, as I still wanted to venture into northern Thailand to explore. So I did my roof work, did this spruce trim, and I started to trim the bamboo in the garden and then put string on top. I didn't quite like how tall some of them were getting. But the next day it was time to explore. I attached Perry to this post, and then set off for the same river as before. Only this time I would be taking a very different path, a more northern path, hence northern Thailand. Anyways, I found the farmland by early afternoon, and then started up the river. I was actually making great time this trip, as I managed to reach Croc Country by nightfall. The next morning I raced through Croc Country, and ended up unharmed. I then continued up the river, knowing I would have to leave it soon. With that being said, I did a lot of travel, before coming across a certain elusive friend of mine. And you know what? Let's go ahead and talk about the ghosts of Thailand. The Indo-Chinese tiger shares many of the same traits as its familial Bengal tigers in India. The main differences being that this one has a slightly smaller skull and prominent but less pronounced stripes. However, the largest difference is a rather unfortunate one. See, according to Global Conservation, there are only 220 Indo-Chinese tigers left in the wild, and most of them are here in Thailand. The estimated population for these tigers was about 40,000 in the year 1970. This drastic fall is due to poaching, habitat loss, and loss of available prey. But there is hope, and it's all happening here in Thailand, as Thailand is home to slowly recovering populations of these tigers. Either way, I considered these encounters to be more than generous, as I continued my way up the river, and eventually left it, heading north. And that night, I spotted a very strange structure. Next morning, I approached said structure, and saw a big mushroom. I don't know what it is with me and finding mushroom structures in these videos, but I could tell the loot was going to be good. However, with that being said, this was also very much not a friendly structure. But upon finding a lot of iron, I crafted myself a new shield, only to find myself in a tough situation soon after. Given that my axe was broken, I crafted an iron sword and climbed up the structure, aiming to reach the top. And after a bit of digging, I did just that. Upon checking the loot, I found quite possibly the best loot I've ever found in any of these videos. Like, look at this. As I kept collecting this genuinely insane loot, I could only think about how the Naga should definitely be scared. On day 55, I crafted myself some armor, and named these name tags. And I had a thought. Is this my first piece of diamond armor in this series? I genuinely don't know, so leave a comment if you think it is. But I now knew I had to keep on my quest for northern Thailand. After figuring out which direction that was in, I water bucket elevator down, and then headed into the forest. Yeah, I was now a lot more confident. Only keep in mind that at all times, 2 pieces of my armor have to be leaf armor, or I'll just overheat. So I'm not necessarily overpowered, unfortunately. Regardless, I found a new river that evening and continued north. This kept into the next day as I steadily made my way into a more mountainous area, confirming that I was, in fact, in northern Thailand. And when I turned this corner, I spotted quite the mountain indeed. And of course, what sat atop it was one of northern Thailand's wonders. The Wat Chalermprakiet is often called the Sky Temple, as it is a Buddhist temple that sits atop these jagged mountains, reaching into the misty clouds of the north. While this might look ancient, it was actually finished in 2004, as a way to commemorate one of Thailand's most notable leaders, King Rama IV, who restored many aspects of Buddhism that had been lost to history. This incredible wonder sits between the cities of Lampang and Chiang Mai, 2 cities that you should absolutely add to your travel itinerary. I climbed up to the temples and took a look around, before seeing one of the most scenic sunsets yet. However, as the night set in, I realized I didn't have a bed. A frantic search ensued as I ran from building to building, knowing mobs would start spawning any second now. But shortly after, I found a bed. I woke up on day 57 and decided that I wanted to go north a bit more before heading home, as this would probably be my only trip north. So I made it back to a river, this time finding a much smaller one, and didn't make it far before nightfall. The next morning I continued on my path, but it wasn't long before I spotted some truly massive farmlands. I ended up navigating this farmland for almost the entire day, as I met up with some villagers. Despite the picturesque nature of this valley, I did see a light in the distance that evening. Yet, on day 59, I woke to this. Good morning. Anyways, I headed towards the light, and my fears were soon confirmed, as it had to be another Naga cave. Okay. And sure enough it was. Yeah, these guys were really creepy, but I warmed up with this zombie, and then fought the Nagas. Once again, they did a lot of damage, but I had better equipment this time, so I got a few hits in. Only they quickly broke my armor and got me really low. I left fast, disappointed, but also not surprised, as if I was gonna properly kill one, I would need a better plan. I crafted some new leaf armor and got ready to head home, only I was completely lost, as I stumbled across more farmland. The new forest I then entered was really eerie, as there was just no noise whatsoever. So I decided to use my one direction theory. If I walk in one direction for long enough, I will get my bearings eventually. And Harry Styles has something to do with it, I don't know. So on day 60, I kept through this forest, hoping to find a river of some kind. And that's when I realized that the sun should rise in the east and set in the west, right? So I could get my bearings from that. Also a good survival tip for all of you out there. But as I noticed I was heading east, I changed my course, only to spot a river. Yet, judging by the size of the river, and the giant catfish within it, I knew this wasn't just any river. The mighty Mekong is a massive river that's fed from the Himalayas of Tibet to the South China Sea, and is partly used as a border between Thailand and Laos, making up over half of the country's respective borders. But it's much more than just a watery border, as over 60 million people in Southeast Asia rely on this river through farming and fishing. Now with that in mind, I continued down the famous river, constantly making sure I was headed south. As I followed the Mekong into day 61, I noticed that it was turning, meaning I had to leave it in order to continue south. As I walked through the forest, taking the usual amount of fall damage, I figured that my next objective, once I get back, should be to finish the exterior of my base, and then kill the Naga. But that would have to wait, because I had some genuinely grueling travel ahead of me. As I hiked through the endless trees, I took many more falls, went as south as I could, and unfortunately went through a lot of food. I cannot tell you how painful these days were. I was genuinely getting worried that I had fully gotten lost. That's why on day 66, when I found this river, I immediately jumped into it and got to rowing. I took every path that headed further south. After dodging some snakes, I found a truly beautiful sight. After appreciating the sand, I followed along the coast, and I soon spotted a rather familiar temple. Accepting my side quest, I quickly entered the temple, and broke this spawner. The pillagers didn't even have time to spawn, so I was able to look around all of the, well, mediocre loot. But it didn't matter, it was now time for me to cross the gulf. And that evening, I found the pillager ship. The next morning, I felt like it was finally time to take care of these pillagers. And given I was still in my overpowered mindset, I would be making them sorry that they breathe the same air as me. Yeah, I went in and just started attacking. I'll be honest, I felt really bad for this guy, Flute Dude. He was just trying to play his music. But I then finished looting and collecting wood before heading back towards my base. Was I too confident? Maybe. But I knew one thing. The next time I spotted that Naga, it was gonna be over for it. Speaking of, I finally reached my base that afternoon, and then put the name tags on my companions. The next morning I got to work on my objective, which was to do the exterior before finding the Naga. And this led me to finishing the roof today, which was pretty cool. On day 69 I capped some more of these bamboo plants, before spotting some unwelcome visitors. Only these weren't regular pillagers, they had axes. Let me correct that, throwing axes. But that was no match for my tactical evasion. I can't say that seriously. Like, look at these guys, it's such a fatal flaw that they hit each other. I almost felt sorry for them. Anyways, that evening, I did my garden lighting. And finally, on day 70, I realized that I was close to finishing my base. Only, hold that thought, because yet again, I got some unwelcome visitors. So, I took care of them. And won, despite my shield breaking. And of course, I went to go and get wood, and this is when I spotted an even more unwelcome visitor. Yeah, I knew I couldn't do anything without a shield, so I returned to the base and vowed to hunt it down tomorrow. This left me to notice that now I just had to decorate my room, and then I'd be more or less done with the base. But again, I was putting that on hold because I had a Naga to hunt. It was time. I headed into the forest with one mission in mind: to find and kill the Naga that had been stalking me this whole time. After dealing with an unusual amount of vanilla mobs, I found myself wondering where this elusive beast was. I then decided to change my manhunt to finding a cave rather than a Naga, as one should lead to the other. Yet, as I searched the nearby land, I only found this small lake. However, just like my previous times, it wasn't until the evening that I actually spotted the cave, due to the light that it produced. Now this cave was pretty far from my base, so I wasn't sure if it was the cave, but it didn't really matter at this point, as I went in and I started fighting. It got me low pretty quickly, but then I managed to sneak some hits, before almost dying. Yeah, this was stressful now. I knew I couldn't run away this time, so I ran up this hill and placed my water to heal up. And this actually made one of the Nagas slide down the hill, which worked to my advantage. I then ate my golden apple and went in for the kill. And after a few hits, I got just that. The second one just kept shooting, which made it easy for me to kill it as well. And even though they didn't drop anything, I felt accomplished. Next morning I learned why they had a lack of drops, as I found some pretty cool loot here. There was this strange gliding armor, as well as a whoopee cushion and lightning necklace, both of which I put on. I want to kill you. Anyways, I decided to continue on into the forest nearby, and after climbing a few mountains throughout the day, I spotted a rather large tree. As I approached it, very active scenery unfolded before me, as I had found one of Thailand's floating markets. The floating markets, or Talad Nam, are popular tourist attractions due to the unique bustling nature of these picturesque water malls. Here you can find vendors selling anything from ready-to-eat foods to trinkets that you can take home with you. There are many of these markets throughout Thailand, so if you plan on visiting one, check and see where they are. However, as I entered the floating market, I had forgotten about a certain status effect. Yeah, this wasn't ideal. But I looked around for decorations and tried to take these empty bookshelves. Never mind. And eventually, I did take some pots. Yes, please. Next morning, I decided to give the raid a quick chance. After all, I was the one who had started it, so I gave it a shot. Only I got low pretty quickly. However, after putting on my rock armor and making an iron helmet, things changed a bit. I ended up killing all of them, including this magic man. Yet, when I looked for the next wave, I couldn't find it anywhere. So, I just decided to leave and head home. On day 74, I decided that my new objective would be to finish my base and take one final trip to eastern Thailand, where I knew there was one last place I wanted to check out. I would also be bringing my companions on this trip. So, after making some new leaf armor, I made it to the coast that evening. The next day, I made it home, before having my food stolen by a seagull. After having Hawaii flashbacks, I then realized that I still have to finish this spruce trim, and that meant heading to the pillager ship. So off to the ship I went, where I got some spruce wood and stayed the night. On day 76, I got 2 more stacks of it, and made it back around midday. I then crafted the spruce gates and put them on my base, before giving Perry some much needed attention. Yeah, I let him help me with the garden, and he was an excellent helper. I mean, come on, this is a little cute. Come on, it is a little cute. Anyways, I was getting closer and closer to finishing this base, but I knew I had to tackle my room. So on day 77, I did my windows, made some bookshelves, placed some carpet, and more or less finished my room. Now I should mention that I'm adding a new segment to this series. On day 99, I will do a base review where I rate my base on a scale from 1 to 10, and then you all can tell me your personal ratings. But with that being said, I moved on to my final base day. I polished my garden by removing some more tall bamboo. Oh, and I got to try out my lightning necklace attack on these mobs, before then making the Great Wall of Stay Away from my base look a little bit nicer. I then made my final interior improvements, before waking up the next morning, knowing that it was time for me to do my eastern voyage. I collected Terrence and Perry, knowing that this would be my final trip with them, and then set off across the Gulf. Now, eastern Thailand is known for its fishing villages, beaches, jungle, and notably the city of Pattaya, which is where the Sanctuary of Truth is. But as I came across the impressive attraction, I hesitated to take this river, as I couldn't put Perry in danger, so I took one further north, near these farmlands. Next day, I continued along this river, and saw that Perry seemed to be having fun. In fact, he kind of reminded me of my cat, Valentino, who was sleeping right behind me. Regardless, I did lots of rowing, before having a close call with a monitor that evening. Yeah, if anything kills Perry, I will make John Wick look like a comedy, okay? Anyways, on day 81, I rowed my way into a lake filled with elephants and crocodiles. And that's when this croc started coming towards Perry. Thinking quickly, I led him through the forest. Only that's when I spotted this pillager campsite. So I put Perry in a boat, and turned to deal with the pillagers. Only I killed this one before it could even shoot me. I then broke the spawners and took a quick look through the loot. The only loot I took were some potatoes and an axe, as I was too good for everything else. Yeah, see where this overconfidence gets me? Regardless, I led Perry through the forest. And to be honest, this might have been the most difficult part of this series. I swear, leading mobs through dense forestry is torture. The lead kept detaching, and Perry decided to just not walk at certain points, which was very helpful. But eventually, I found water, and we followed it east, which is where I continued through day 82. You know, something that's been kind of bothering me recently. It doesn't really have to do with this, but all over social media, no matter where I go, I've had to take a break from like Instagram and all that. I've since deleted TikTok. Everywhere I go, it's just awful comments. I don't know what it is about that. I don't know what it is. It could be the most positive post in the world. I'll go this way. It could be the most positive post in the world, and just truly terrible comments. And I don't get it. It didn't always used to be that way. I mean, on my channel, I get, a handful of negative comments, and I don't mind them. For the most part, they're justified. I have to clean things here and there, I might have mistakes here and there, things like that. That's fine. I am alright with that. But it's on every other bit of social media. I just don't know why. So I suppose this is my way of saying thank you to you guys, because I really do have a terrific community. Yeah, thank you to you guys. I mean, you're all pretty amazing. And I've run into a tree. That's okay. We're just gonna go here. Rant aside, I came to a dead end, which prompted me to use Google Maps to find the correct river path. So, after doing so, I think I finally found the right path. Well, let's hope. Next day, I followed this river that got really narrow in some bits, before then finding another dead end. So, I left Perry and decided to scout ahead, and that's when I saw a relieving sight. I led Perry through the forest again, and then entered one of Thailand's most peaceful parks. Oh. Interesting. I don't think pandas are in Thailand, but well, that's an oversight. We'll overlook that. You tired? The Pham Nam Sawai Park is a national park in eastern Thailand that is a very special place of pilgrimage for Buddhists. Here you can find over 1,000 bells that lead up to this beautiful statue, and you can even ring the bells yourself. This is definitely a more hidden destination, and one that might appeal to the most solemn of travelers. Oh, and from what I could find, it looks like a marathon takes place here every year, so I might actually have to go and do that. I walked the trail with Perry and we went up to the statue. Before continuing along the trail into the evening. And the next morning, I knew it was time for me to say goodbye to Perry. I walked him to the end of the path here, before saying my final goodbyes. Looks like this is the end here. So, Perry, it has been an honor. Alright, Perry. Be free. Go on. Right out there. Be free. Come on, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Just go on. Maybe if I walk away, that'll make it easier for you. This is goodbye. I have one more stop to make. Now it was Terrence's turn. I placed him in this nearby pond, back in fresh water where arowanas belong. So, goodbye to you as well, Terrence. It's been an honor. You were here since pretty early on, so. And now it was time for me to return home for a proper base review. So I found the river from before and pulled up my Google Maps. On day 85, I continued my exhilarating rowing journey, although I did miss my 2 friends. Regardless, the last trip home was probably the worst in terms of painful travel, thanks not only to an abundance of rowing and hiking, but also wrong directions. Either way, you know what time it is. It is time for me to finally rate Thailand's difficulty. Thailand is a place that met my expectations in terms of challenges. I almost died multiple times, and the Nagas were not easy foes. And so, for those reasons, I give Thailand a very commendable difficulty rating of 8 out of 10. Now, remember, this rating isn't for the quality of the location, but rather for how hard it was for me to survive. But with that being said, on day 92, I finally found myself at the coast. However, I had gone a completely different way, evident by not only the amount of time it took, but also by this big tower on the beach that I clearly hadn't seen before. Reluctantly agreeing to one more side quest, I entered the tower, and it was pretty eerie. But what made it worse was this guy. What? What is that? What is that? So, following my typical tactics, I climbed up. And that's when I found some pretty good food. Yet, after exploring some more, I found multiple creatures that got me really low. And yeah, I was not about to die on day 92. No, not happening. But next morning I wasn't quite ready to give up on this place yet, as I went in from the top, and found this room with water that oddly made me start freezing. Yeah, it was all really strange, but after almost running into this creeper, I took one last look around and decided that it just wasn't worth the risk. So I left, hoping to get back to my base as soon as possible, as I want to prepare it for the base review. So up the coast I went, and after spotting this coral snake, I also eventually spotted the pillager base. That was my cue to cut across the gulf, which I happily did so, but not before sleeping at the old pillager ship. Speaking of the pillager ship, I took one last look through it, deciding to climb to the very top. This is where I would hide loot. As it turns out, my instincts were correct. Only there was a book up here. With every new discovery you make, and with every biome you explore, you become older and wiser. The overworld no longer feels overwhelming to you. I'm actually gonna claim this one. I'm gonna title it Profound. There we go. After having my first published book, I then placed my TNT, as I was ready to give a final goodbye to this oddly helpful ship. However, when I went to craft a lever, I realized that I needed cobblestone, and there just was none here. So I swam down to the surprisingly shallow bottom of the gulf, and placed a door, before mining what appeared to only be deep slate. And guess what? Deep slate doesn't work the same as cobblestone. Makes no sense, but this was really frustrating as I wanted to blow it up. Now let me pause right here. because for some reason I didn't even consider that I could just craft a button. Yeah, I really don't have anything else to say about this. You know, it was probably Valentino's fault. We'll go with that. Anyways, I left from my base and made it back by sunset. And this brings me to day 95, where I began my mad rush to make my base look as nice as possible, as the base review would be coming on day 99. So I placed my new items, killed these roaches, harvested my crops, did some ambient lighting. After finding a Perry lookalike, I did even more lighting that night. Next day I finished up with my ambient lighting, before making a big water path for my garden. Yeah, I dug out this entire area while it rained. And when that rain turned into a storm, I went to sleep. Before waking up and trying to finish my garden water path, which was taking an unreasonably long time to do. Like, it's just a path for water to go into. So, thinking with my brain, I crafted 9 more water buckets. And got to work. I finished off the day by planting my crops that I had collected. Which brings me to the last day before base review. I finished off my crop planting, then finished off my house detail, placed these smooth sandstone slabs to give the beach a certain look, and then moved all of my chests inside, which was a bit of a pain to be honest. But finally, after all that effort, it was time to review my base. I woke up on day 99, and slowly went through each room for assessment. And yes, even though I built it, I will be rating it fairly. This is not a corrupt establishment. But, of course, you can leave your own ratings down below. Anyways, starting with the garden. Despite the effort I put into it, the whole image of the garden feels a bit unfinished, even though it is somewhat pleasant. But bonus points for functionality, as these papayas got me through some tough fights. Now, as for the kitchen, this is probably the worst kitchen I've ever made. I just didn't use it, so I didn't feel like I needed to make it nice, but that's all I really have to say on this matter. However, the rest of the first floor is pretty good. I actually do quite like how open it is, and these chairs are pretty cool. Come on. My room might not be appealing to you all, but it works for me. I don't like having a large room, and I like having something that's easier to manage, so yeah, my room was alright. Now for my favorite part, the exterior of my base. I really liked my base design this time. The decision to put it on water earns me some bonus points for sure, and the roof, despite how long it took me, was definitely worth the effort. So overall I give this base a pretty solid 6.5 out of 10. Not my best, not my worst. But anyways, you all know what time it is. I woke up on day 100 and did some swimming with this floaty thing, all while I thought about just how great the last 100 days had been. Thailand might be the land of the free, but what makes it free are the endless wonders within its borders. The unique architecture that instantly brings you to the contrasting farmlands that stretch across this whole country. But even though you've spent these days with me here in Minecraft, you really do need to go and see it all for yourself, as there is nowhere quite like Pratet Thai. Alright, with that being said, it's about that time. Hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.